She gave water to a homeless man. He offered her a new life. The grand boardroom, bathed in the soft, bruised glow of the setting sun filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows, hummed with an expectant silence. The polished mahogany table, vast and reflective, seemed to absorb the muted conversations, amplifying the subtle rustle of expensive suits and the faint clink of porcelain. Orion Thorne, impeccably suited in charcoal gray, his silk tie a precise knot against his crisp white shirt, adjusted it with a practiced, almost predatory gleam in his eyes. Beside him, Desdemona, adorned in diamonds that seemed to catch every available ray of light, turning them into cold, glittering shards, offered a brittle, triumphant smile. They sat at the head of the polished mahogany table, occupying the seats usually reserved for the patriarch, opposite a man who, until moments ago, had been a phantom in their lives, a reclusive titan of industry. Sterling Vance, the patriarch, the enigma, was finally present. His gaze, sharp and unwavering, swept across the faces of those assembled, his legal team, his closest advisors, and of course, his great-nephew and his wife. A faint scent of old money, a mix of aged leather and imported cigars, lingered in the air, a scent Sterling had grown to despise, for it often masked the stench of avarice. "The time for pretense is over," Sterling Vance declared. His voice, though aged, resonated with an authority that had once commanded global markets. It was a voice that had brokered peace treaties and instigated corporate takeovers, a voice that carried the weight of continents. He leaned forward slightly, his silver hair neatly combed, each strand a testament to careful grooming, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the threadbare garments he had so recently shed. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through the room, a recognition of the dormant power stirring. "The game, as it were, has concluded." Orion Thorne chuckled, a nervous, dismissive sound that grated on Sterling's ears. It was the sound of someone trying to project confidence while a tremor of unease snaked through their carefully constructed composure. "Uncle Sterling, with all due respect, what game are you referring to?" "We are here, as per your summons, to discuss the future of Vance Global." A future, Sterling might add, that Desdemona and himself have been diligently preparing for. He exchanged a knowing look with his wife, who nodded in agreement, a smug expression firming on her lips. They believed this was merely the formal handover, the culmination of years of calculated flattery and strategic maneuvering. The old man, they mused, was simply indulging in a final, dramatic flair before ceding his empire. Their eyes, Sterling noted, lingered not on his face, but on the documents laid before Mr. Finch, the lawyer, documents they presumed contained their grand inheritance. Sterling Vance merely offered a faint, almost imperceptible smirk. His eyes, however, held a depth of knowing that sent a shiver down the spines of those who truly understood his character, those few who had seen the ruthless intelligence beneath the quiet exterior. He watched them, these two who saw only the vast fortune, the sprawling empire, and their own reflection in its golden gleam. They were still oblivious, still trapped in their gilded cage of ambition, utterly blind to the intricate web he had meticulously spun around them. The irony, a bitter and potent vintage, was not lost on Sterling Vance. He had sought to unmask them, and in their own arrogance, they had eagerly torn off their own masks, revealing the true nature of the beasts within. The revelation was imminent, and the air crackled with the unspoken truth, a truth that would shatter their carefully constructed world into a million irreparable pieces. The scent of their impending doom, sweet and acrid, hung in the air, a just dessert. Sterling Vance had not always been a reclusive figure shrouded in mystery. Decades prior, he had been a whirlwind of innovation, a visionary who had foreseen the global shift towards sustainable technology long before it became a popular mantra. He had built Vance Global from a nascent idea into an empire that spanned continents, its influence touching every aspect of modern life, from the microchips in their phones to the clean energy powering their homes. He had poured his lifeblood into its creation, sacrificing personal relationships, endless nights of sleep, and the quiet joys of a simple existence. He remembered the thrill of the early days, the genuine camaraderie with his small team, the shared vision that transcended mere profit. Yet, as his fortune swelled, so too did a profound sense of emptiness within him. He had amassed more wealth than several lifetimes could spend, commanded respect from world leaders, and yet, he felt utterly alone, isolated by the very success he had relentlessly pursued. The isolation wasn't born of solitude, not truly, but of a chilling realization. People no longer saw Sterling Vance, the man, the innovator, the flawed human being. They saw Sterling Vance, the magnate, the Midas touch, the walking, breathing bank account. Every smile seemed a little too eager, every compliment a shade too sycophantic, every gesture of affection tainted by the unspoken expectation of a handout, a favor, or a slice of his colossal pie. His family, those who remained, were no exception. They circled like vultures, their hunger for his legacy thinly veiled beneath layers of manufactured concern and obligatory visits. He had witnessed the subtle shifts in their gazes, the way their eyes lingered on his expensive watches, the calculated enthusiasm with which they praised his every decision, no matter how trivial. He recalled a Christmas dinner years ago, a forced gathering where his niece had casually mentioned her failing startup, then looked at him with doe eyes. The next day, a package from his lawyers arrived at her door. It was always like this. The breaking point had come gradually, a slow erosion of trust, a corrosive acid eating away at the last vestiges of his faith in humanity. He recalled a particularly galling incident years ago, when a distant relative, pleading poverty, had tearfully begged for a substantial loan for a medical emergency, only for her social media feed to explode with photos of a newly acquired luxury sports car weeks later, parked proudly outside her sprawling Hamptons retreat. Then there were the numerous charity galas he dutifully attended, events where acquaintances, eager to curry favor, would loudly praise his generosity while discreetly arranging for their own businesses to secure lucrative contracts with Vance Global, leveraging his name for their own gain. The hypocrisy was a bitter pill to swallow. Even his great-nephew, Orion Thorne, whom he had meticulously groomed as a potential heir, had begun to exhibit disturbing traits. Orion's ambition, once admirable, had curdled into a ruthless avarice, a willingness to step over anyone to reach the top. Sterling had seen him dismiss loyal, long-serving employees without a flicker of remorse, heard him boast of questionable business deals, always with the underlying assumption that his name and the Vance legacy would protect him. His wife, Desdemona, was a perfect complement, a woman whose entire existence seemed predicated on the accumulation of designer labels and social status, her conversations peppered with discussions of property values and the latest exclusive events. They had become the embodiment of everything Sterling had come to despise about the world his wealth had created. They feigned deference, offered platitudes about family legacy, but their eyes, Sterling knew, were always fixed on the bottom line, on the inheritance that would solidify their place among the elite. Their laughter, when it reached his ears, sounded hollow, echoing in the vast, empty halls of his mansion. The idea of the disguise had thus been born not out of whimsy, but out of a desperate, primal need for truth, a last-ditch effort to find a shred of genuine connection in a world that seemed determined to commodify everything. How else, he mused, could one truly discern character if stripped of all external markers of power and prestige? If one were reduced to their most vulnerable state, would genuine kindness emerge, or would the inherent cruelty of humanity prevail? He needed to see beyond the masks, beyond the carefully constructed facades of politeness and false concern. He needed to test those he had considered for his legacy, and perhaps, just perhaps, find someone worthy of his trust, someone who saw not his fortune, but his humanity. It was a gamble, a risky and emotionally taxing endeavor, but the alternative was a lifetime of gilded isolation, a fate he found more terrifying than any risk. His plan was meticulously crafted, born from months of quiet observation and careful deliberation. He spent weeks researching the habits and realities of the homeless population, poring over sociological studies, consulting with social workers under strict non-disclosure agreements, and even discreet private investigators who mapped out daily routines of individuals living on the streets. He arranged for a secret, modest apartment in a nondescript part of the city, a place where he could shed his opulent life and assume his new persona, far from prying eyes. The apartment was sparsely furnished, a stark contrast to his sprawling penthouse, and its very ordinariness was a balm to his overstimulated senses. His disguise was simple yet remarkably effective: old, ill-fitting clothes sourced from charity bins, a matted wig that obscured his distinctive silver hair, a carefully applied layer of grime and dirt that seemed to cling to his skin, and a stooped posture that exaggerated his age and frailty, making him seem smaller, less significant. He practiced the walk, the shuffle, the averted gaze in front of a full-length mirror, until Sterling Vance, the Titan, had vanished, replaced by Arthur, the Invisible Man. He carried only a worn backpack, a few dollars, and a small, burner phone for emergencies, its existence known only to two individuals. His personal doctor, Dr. Eris Thorne, no relation to Orion, a man whose loyalty and discretion were beyond question, was sworn to secrecy and on call for any health concerns. His most trusted lawyer, Mr. Alastair Finch, a man of unimpeachable integrity, was privy to the general outline of the plan, tasked with executing his final wishes should anything unforeseen occur. For several months, Sterling Vance would disappear, becoming simply another forgotten face on the bustling streets, an invisible man seeking to finally see. He would walk among them, his own family, his own employees, his own city, and observe how they treated the least of them. The stage was set, the curtain drawn, and the test was about to begin. The silence of his new, tiny apartment was deafening, yet strangely peaceful. The transformation was jarring, even for Sterling Vance himself. The tailored suits were replaced by threadbare trousers and a faded, oversized jacket that seemed to swallow his frail frame, smelling faintly of stale cigarette smoke and damp concrete. His polished leather shoes gave way to scuffed, ill-fitting sneakers that pinched his toes. His silver hair, once meticulously styled, was now hidden beneath a greasy, disheveled wig, itchy against his scalp, and a faint, almost imperceptible layer of dirt and sweat adorned his face, giving him the appearance of someone long acquainted with the harshness of the streets. He walked with a slight shuffle, a deliberate slowing of his once purposeful stride, his shoulders hunched as if burdened by an invisible weight, a lifetime of unspoken sorrow. He had shed the skin of Sterling Vance, the magnate, and emerged as Arthur, an elderly, forgotten man, adrift in the unforgiving currents of the city. The anonymity was both liberating and profoundly chilling. No one looked at him with deference, no one sought his opinion, no one even met his gaze for longer than a fleeting, dismissive second. He was a ghost, a blur in the periphery, and it was precisely what he needed. The biting wind of early autumn, which in his former life he would have barely noticed from inside a heated limousine, now cut through his thin clothing, a constant, physical reminder of his new reality. His initial encounters with Orion and Desdemona were, as he had grimly anticipated, a testament to their true character, a confirmation of his deepest fears. One crisp autumn afternoon, Sterling, in his disguise, found himself resting on a public bench near a high-end cafe, nursing a lukewarm cup of instant coffee he had purchased with his meager funds, its bitter taste a comfort in its familiarity. The aroma of expensive roasted beans wafted from the cafe, a cruel reminder of the life he had left behind. Across the street, a sleek, black limousine, its windows tinted, pulled up silently, and out stepped Orion and Desdemona Thorne, resplendent in their designer attire, Desdemona in a tailored cashmere coat and impossibly high heels, Orion in a perfectly cut suit. They were meeting with a prominent real estate developer, a shark in their own waters, no doubt discussing some new venture that would further line their already overflowing pockets, perhaps another luxury high-rise that would displace existing communities. As they ascended the ornate steps of the cafe, Desdemona's eyes, scanning the street with an air of entitled disdain, landed on Sterling. Her brow furrowed, a faint grimace twisting her perfectly sculpted features, as if she had just spotted a stain on her bespoke handbag. "Honestly, Orion," she murmured, her voice a low, throaty purr that Sterling could still overhear, carried on the breeze, "can't something be done about these vagrants?" They blight the aesthetic of the entire district. It's an embarrassment when we have important clients visiting Vance properties. The image, darling, the image. She gestured vaguely in his direction with a manicured hand, adorned with sparkling rings, as if shooing a particularly irritating fly. Orion, barely sparing Sterling a glance, merely grunted in agreement, already pulling out his phone. Indeed, darling. I've already spoken to building management. They'll be encouraged to move along. Perhaps a new bylaw, more aggressive deterrence. His tone was devoid of any compassion, a cold, clinical assessment of an inconvenience, a problem to be eradicated, not a human being. They vanished into the cafe, the chime of the door a final, dismissive note, their voices fading, leaving Sterling to reflect on the casual cruelty of their words, the inherent belief that human beings, if they did not contribute to their aesthetic or financial comfort, were merely nuisances to be swept away, like litter. The coffee in his cup suddenly tasted even more bitter. A few days later, Sterling found himself near one of Vance Global's imposing corporate buildings, a shimmering glass and steel monument to his own legacy, reaching towards the sky like a greedy finger. He sat on the cold concrete steps, the chill seeping into his bones, observing the endless stream of impeccably dressed professionals rushing past, their faces buried in phones, their hurried footsteps echoing in the urban canyon. He had chosen this spot deliberately, knowing Orion frequently visited this particular office. True to form, Orion Thorne emerged from the revolving doors, speaking animatedly into his phone, his stride confident and authoritative, his voice a booming echo in the vast lobby. He was accompanied by a young, eager assistant, clutching a briefcase overflowing with documents. As Orion descended the steps, his path brought him directly past Sterling, who had lowered his gaze, appearing to be asleep, a tattered blanket draped over his legs. Suddenly, Orion's foot snagged on something, Sterling's worn backpack, which he had deliberately placed slightly in the pathway, a subtle trap. Orion stumbled, catching himself before he fell, his face contorting in a mixture of surprise and incandescent rage, his expensive coffee sloshing over his hand. He looked down at Sterling, who slowly raised his head, feigning confusion, his eyes blinking innocently. "Watch where you're going, old man." Orion snapped, his voice sharp with irritation, carrying the weight of his perceived importance. "Do you have any idea how important my schedule is? This is a private building, not a public campground. Get out of here before I call security and have you forcibly removed." He even nudged Sterling's backpack with his polished leather shoe, a gesture of petty dominance, as if kicking a stray dog. The assistant, wide-eyed, stood silently, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to contradict his superior, his gaze darting nervously between Orion and Sterling. Sterling merely nodded meekly, gathering his meager belongings, the backpack feeling heavier than usual, and slowly shuffled away, his heart heavy, a familiar ache settling in his chest. Orion and Desdemona did not merely ignore, they actively scorned, their disdain a tangible force, a suffocating blanket of contempt. He walked for several blocks, the cold seeping deeper, not just from the stone, but from the chilling confirmation of their character. It was amidst this chilling indifference, this casual cruelty, that Sterling encountered Alara Meadowbrook. She was a woman of quiet dignity, her silver hair, though neatly kept, often escaping in soft wisps around her gentle face, like a halo. A retired librarian, Alara lived a modest life, her days filled with the quiet rhythm of reading, tending to her small potted plants on her windowsill, each leaf a testament to her care, and volunteering at a local community center, where she read stories to children. She didn't have much, her pension barely stretching to cover her humble needs, but what she possessed in abundance was a profound wellspring of empathy, a kindness that radiated from her like a gentle warmth. Sterling first saw her at the public park, a patch of green sanctuary in the urban sprawl, where he often sought refuge from the relentless concrete and noise. He was sitting on a secluded bench, feeling the gnawing pang of thirst, the city's concrete heat radiating around him, stealing the moisture from his body. He had spent his last few dollars on a cheap meal, a greasy hot dog that now sat uncomfortably in his stomach, and water was a luxury he had to consider carefully, weighing its cost against tomorrow's hunger. Elara was walking her small, elderly terrier, Pip, a creature as gentle and unassuming as its owner, its tail wagging slowly. As she passed Sterling's bench, her eyes, kind and observant, met his. She didn't look away with discomfort or suspicion, as so many others did. She saw the tremor in his hands, the faint sheen of sweat on his brow, the slight listlessness in his posture. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice soft and melodious, like a forgotten lullaby. "You look a bit parched. Would you perhaps like some water?" She reached into her worn canvas bag, a practical item filled with a book and a small bag of dog treats, and produced a plastic bottle of water, still half full. It was clearly her own, something she had brought for herself, a simple necessity. She offered it with a small, genuine smile, no pity in her eyes, only simple human concern, a pure, unadulterated act of empathy. Sterling, surprised by the unprompted gesture, feigned a slight hesitation, a flicker of his old, guarded self. "Oh, no, ma'am, I couldn't possibly," he mumbled, his voice raspy, unaccustomed to expressing genuine gratitude. "Nonsense," Elara insisted gently, stepping closer, her small dog looking up at Sterling with an equally soft gaze. "It's a warm day, and staying hydrated is important. Please, take it. I have plenty at home." She held out the bottle, her hand steady, her expression unwavering, the warmth of her touch radiating through the plastic. Sterling took it, his fingers brushing hers. Her touch was warm, comforting, a stark contrast to the cold indifference he had become so used to. "Thank you," he managed, his voice thick with unfeigned emotion, a lump forming in his throat. He unscrewed the cap and drank deeply, the cool water a balm to his parched throat and, more profoundly, to his weary soul. It was more than just water, it was a drink of pure, unadulterated human kindness. "Are you all right, dear?" Elara asked, her concern genuine, her eyes searching his face. "You look a little tired. And perhaps a bit lost." "Just a long day," Sterling replied, a small, genuine smile forming on his lips, a smile that hadn't reached his eyes in years. "It's kind of you to ask. Most people just walk on by." "Well, you never know when a kind word might make a difference," she said, her smile broadening, lighting up her gentle features. "My name is Elara Meadowbrook. I used to be a librarian. Always believed in the power of a good story, and a good deed." She paused, then added, her voice thoughtful, "If you need anything else, or just a quiet place to sit, the public library a few blocks down is always open. It's warm in winter, cool in summer, and no one ever bothers you there. It's a sanctuary for all." With a final, warm nod, she continued her walk, her little terrier trotting faithfully beside her, leaving Sterling alone with his thoughts and the half-empty bottle of water. Sterling watched her go, the water bottle clutched in his hand, a strange warmth spreading through his chest. The contrast was stark, almost blinding. Orion and Desdemona, with their boundless wealth and influence, had offered only contempt and dismissal, their words like daggers. Elara, with her modest means and unassuming existence, had offered a piece of herself, a simple, selfless act of compassion, expecting nothing in return. It wasn't about the water, it was about the recognition of his humanity, the unprompted generosity of spirit, the simple act of seeing him. She saw not a vagrant, but a fellow human being in need, deserving of basic kindness. In that moment, Sterling Vance knew, with an absolute certainty, that his test had yielded its most profound result. His future, and the future of his empire, was becoming clear. The quiet librarian, with her simple kindness, had shone a light into the darkest corners of his disillusioned heart. The air in the grand boardroom was thick with anticipation. It was the annual Vance Global Stakeholders Meeting, a carefully orchestrated event where Sterling Vance typically made a brief, ceremonial appearance before retreating to his private offices, leaving the day-to-day operations to his chosen executives. This year, however, felt different. A palpable tension hung in the air, a sense of an impending shift in the corporate landscape. Whispers about Sterling's advanced age and rumored health issues had circulated for months, fueling speculation about his successor. Orion Thorne, radiating an almost unbearable self-satisfaction, stood at the podium, delivering a polished presentation on the company's future trajectory, a trajectory he clearly envisioned himself leading, his voice booming with a manufactured confidence. He spoke of aggressive expansion, market domination, and maximizing shareholder value, conveniently omitting any mention of ethical considerations or sustainable practices. Desdemona, seated prominently in the front row, beamed up at him, her pride almost a physical entity, her eyes sparkling with the reflection of future riches. The whispers among the lesser stakeholders and board members revolved around Sterling's impending retirement and Orion's inevitable ascension. They assumed the old man was merely here for a final farewell. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors at the back of the boardroom swung open with a hushed creak that seemed to echo in the cavernous room. All heads turned, the collective gaze of dozens of powerful individuals converging on the entrance. Standing framed in the doorway, silhouetted against the bright hallway lights, was a figure who commanded instant attention. It was Sterling Vance, but not the frail, stooped old man they had glimpsed moments earlier through the glass of his private office, a brief, fleeting image that had reinforced their assumptions. This was Sterling Vance, the Titan, the legend. He was impeccably dressed in a custom-tailored charcoal suit, the fabric clinging perfectly to his now upright, strong frame, his silver hair neatly swept back, gleaming under the chandeliers, his eyes piercing and alert, missing nothing. He walked with a firm, deliberate stride, a presence that seemed to fill the vast room, radiating an undeniable power that had been carefully hidden for months. Behind him, his trusted legal counsel, Mr. Alastair Finch, entered, a formidable stack of documents clutched in his hand, his face unreadable but his posture conveying a quiet gravitas. Orion Thorne, mid-sentence, his voice caught in his throat, faltered. His confident smile wavered, replaced by a look of utter bewilderment, then a dawning horror. Desdemona's jaw dropped, her perfectly made-up face draining of all color, the life seeming to leach from her features as if a switch had been flipped. They had expected an old man, perhaps a bit more composed than usual, but certainly not this commanding, almost formidable presence, a ghost come back to life, radiating an unexpected vitality. Their confusion was mirrored across the room, a wave of stunned silence preceding whispers that rippled through the assembled stakeholders, turning into murmurs of awe and apprehension. What was happening? Sterling Vance walked to the head of the table, his gaze sweeping over Orion and Desdemona, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on his lips, a hint of the game's true conclusion. He took his customary seat, not at the head of the table as they had expected, but the one facing the entire assembly, a position of observation, of judgment, a conductor about to lead a very unexpected symphony. He leaned forward slightly, his hands clasped before him, his gaze firm, unwavering. Orion, Sterling's voice cut through the stunned silence, clear and resonant, filling the vast space, each syllable carrying a weight that settled heavily on every ear. You speak of the future of Vance Global. You speak of legacy. But what kind of legacy are you prepared to build? A legacy of profit at any cost? Of ruthless disregard for those who fall by the wayside? Orion, still reeling, managed to stammer, his voice a pathetic croak, Uncle Sterling, I was merely outlining our strategic vision, our commitment to the values you instilled, innovation, growth, market leadership. Values? Sterling interjected, his voice hardening, each word a hammer blow, precise and impactful. What values, Orion? The value of turning a blind eye to suffering? The value of contempt for those less fortunate? The value of believing that wealth exempts one from basic human decency, from common courtesy, from the very notion of a shared humanity? He paused, letting his words hang in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning, heavy with the weight of the months he had spent as Arthur. Orion and Desdemona exchanged panicked glances, their eyes wide with a cold dread that was beginning to coalesce in their stomachs. They still didn't understand the full scope of his words, but the chilling realization that something was terribly wrong was beginning to dawn. For the past several months, Sterling continued, his voice calm, yet laced with an undeniable edge of contempt, a quiet fury that resonated in the silence, I have walked among you. Not as Sterling Vance, the magnate, the figurehead, but as Arthur, an old, frail, homeless man. I shed my wealth, my status, my very identity, to see who you truly are, stripped of the pretense that my fortune demands. To see how you would treat someone who could offer you nothing in return. A collective gasp swept through the room, a wave of shock and disbelief. Orion's face went from pale to ashen, the blood draining from his features, leaving him looking like a death mask. Desdemona let out a small, strangled sound, a choked gasp, her eyes wide with horror as the pieces of the puzzle began to violently click into place, a horrifying realization. The color from her expensive lipstick seemed to bleed into the pallor of her skin. Orion, Sterling's gaze locked onto his great-nephew, his eyes like steel. Do you recall a few weeks ago, outside the Vance Global South Tower, you nearly tripped over a vagrant's backpack? Do you recall threatening to call security and have him forcibly removed, simply for resting on your steps, despite his obvious frailty? Do you recall the assistant's discomfort, the chill in the air? Orion stammered, his voice broken, Uncle Sterling, I didn't know, it was just a misunderstanding. I thought he was just a nuisance. A nuisance? Sterling scoffed, the word dripping with disdain. And Desdemona, do you recall, not even a month ago, lamenting the presence of vagrants near the high-end cafe, deeming them a blight on the district's aesthetic? You wished them encouraged to move along, did you not? You dismissed a fellow human being as a mere inconvenience to your refined sensibilities. Desdemona, her eyes brimming with tears of pure, unadulterated terror, tears that streaked her expensive makeup, could only shake her head mutely, a strangled no, escaping her lips, a desperate, futile denial. Her carefully constructed facade had shattered. You saw an old, vulnerable man, and you saw an inconvenience, Sterling stated, his voice devoid of emotion, a pronouncement of judgment that echoed in the silent room. You saw someone beneath you, someone to be scorned, dismissed, and removed, simply because they did not contribute to your comfort or your image. You failed the test of basic humanity. He gestured to Mr. Finch, who stood patiently, documents in hand. Mr. Finch, if you would be so kind as to read the revised will. Alistair Finch stepped forward, his expression grave, his eyes occasionally flickering towards the now crumbling figures of Orion and Desdemona. He began to read. The terms were unambiguous, devastatingly clear. The vast majority of Sterling Vance's fortune, the controlling stake in Vance Global, the meticulously groomed legacy, the very foundation of their expected future, was being systematically diverted from Orion and Desdemona Thorne. Their names, once central to the succession plan, were now conspicuously absent from the primary beneficiaries. The room held its breath, witnessing the spectacular collapse of an empire, not through financial ruin, but through the moral bankruptcy of its chosen heirs. The mask had not simply fallen, it had been violently ripped away, exposing the ugly truth beneath. The silence that followed was thick with the weight of shattered ambitions. The immediate aftermath of the revelation was a chaotic symphony of disbelief, fury, and utter devastation for Orion and Desdemona Thorne. Orion, his face contorted with a mixture of rage and abject fear, his suit rumpled from his earlier lunge, lunged forward again, shouting, his voice hoarse, "This is preposterous. A trick. You can't do this, Uncle. I've dedicated my life to this company. I'm your family. This is an insult. A cruel joke." His words were met with cold, unyielding silence from Sterling. Sterling Vance merely raised a hand, a simple, dismissive gesture that carried more authority than Orion's entire tirade, silencing him instantly. You dedicated your life to my money, Orion, not my company, and certainly not my family values. You failed the only test that truly mattered. You revealed your true self, and it was not worthy. Mr. Finch continued to read, each clause of the revised will a nail in the coffin of their aspirations, meticulously detailing the revocation of their authority, their positions, their very claim to the Vance name in any corporate capacity. Not only were Orion and Desdemona disinherited from the core empire, but their existing positions within Vance Global were also terminated, effective immediately, stripped of their power and prestige. Any personal assets that had been acquired through direct Vance Global funds or undue influence, including their sprawling mansion and their collection of luxury vehicles, were to be meticulously audited and reclaimed, a process that would leave them virtually penniless. Their social standing, once unassailable, dissolved into public humiliation. The story, leaked by a disgruntled board member or perhaps by Sterling's own design, spread like wildfire through the city's elite circles, whispered over champagne flutes and at exclusive country clubs. The Thorn fiasco became the scandal of the season, a cautionary tale whispered at every gala and golf course, a stark reminder that even the most powerful could fall from grace. Orion and Desdemona found themselves pariahs overnight. Their phone calls went unanswered, their invitations to exclusive events vanished, replaced by awkward silences and outright rejections. The high society friends who had once fawned over them now crossed the street to avoid them, their smiles replaced by thinly veiled contempt. Desdemona's designer wardrobe and diamond collection suddenly seemed grotesque, symbols of a life built on sand, hollow and meaningless. They were forced to sell their opulent mansion, piece by agonizing piece, their luxury cars, their art collection, to pay off debts and simply to survive, to stave off total destitution. Orion, once so confident, so arrogant, crumbled under the weight of public scorn and financial ruin. He tried to start small ventures, desperate to regain his footing, but his reputation preceded him, a black mark on his once pristine resume, a stench of greed that repelled investors. Desdemona, stripped of her status, her social currency gone, struggled to adapt to a life without endless spending, without the admiring glances of others. Their marriage, built on shared ambition and materialism, began to crack under the immense pressure, revealing the hollowness beneath, the lack of genuine affection or shared values. They were left with nothing but their bitter regrets and the crushing realization that their greed, their casual cruelty, had cost them everything. Their opulent world had collapsed, leaving them exposed and adrift. While the Thorns spiraled into their self-made abyss, Elara Meadowbrook's life was about to undergo a transformation of an entirely different kind. A week after the board meeting, a discreet black sedan, polished to a mirror shine, pulled up quietly outside her modest apartment building. A well-dressed gentleman, Mr. Alastair Finch, Sterling Vance's lawyer, politely requested a moment of her time. Elara, initially wary, a lifetime of quiet independence making her cautious, agreed, inviting him into her small, cozy living room, which smelled faintly of old books and fresh tea. Mr. Finch, seated in her small armchair, carefully explained the situation, speaking in a calm, measured tone. He spoke of Sterling Vance's disguise, his months on the streets, his search for genuine kindness in a cynical world, and her profound impact on him. Elara listened, her eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and wonder, occasionally glancing at her small terrier, Pip, curled on the rug, as if seeking confirmation. She remembered the frail old man, the bottle of water, the simple words of kindness she had offered without a second thought. It seemed like a lifetime ago, a fleeting moment of compassion she had barely thought twice about, one of many small acts she performed daily. Then, Mr. Finch presented her with a set of documents, crisp and official. "Ms. Meadowbrook," he began, his voice gentle, his gaze warm, "Mr. Vance wishes to express his profound gratitude. He has established a substantial trust in your name, sufficient to ensure your comfort and financial security for the rest of your life, well beyond your humble needs. In addition, he has purchased a beautiful, fully renovated historic home with a large garden, exactly the kind you mentioned you always dreamed of, a quiet sanctuary, should you choose to accept it. It is located in a lovely neighborhood, known for its community spirit and excellent public library. Elara could only stare, her mind struggling to process the enormity of what she was hearing. A comfortable home? Financial security? She, who had carefully budgeted every penny, who had dreamed of a small cottage with a garden but never truly believed it possible, had now been given a world of possibilities. Tears welled in her eyes, not of sadness, but of overwhelming gratitude and pure, unadulterated shock, a warmth spreading through her chest that rivaled the sun. "But, why?" she whispered, her voice trembling, barely audible. "I only gave him some water." "Because," Mr. Finch replied with a kind smile, "you saw a human being in need, Ms. Meadowbrook, when others saw only a nuisance. You offered kindness when others offered only contempt. You gave a simple bottle of water, and in doing so, you demonstrated a wealth of character, a depth of compassion, that Mr. Vance values above all else." It was not the water, but the heart behind it. Elara accepted, her heart overflowing with a quiet, profound joy. Her life, which had been perfectly content in its modesty, was suddenly imbued with boundless possibility. She could finally pursue her dream of establishing a community literacy program, converting a part of her new home into a cozy reading nook for neighborhood children, filling it with books and stories. She could travel, finally see the places she had only read about in books, touch the ancient stones and walk the bustling streets she had only imagined. Her quiet acts of kindness had resonated profoundly, finding a reward far beyond anything she could have ever conceived. Her spirit, already bright, now shone with a newfound serenity. Months turned into a year. Sterling Vance, having meticulously restructured his empire, appointed a new, ethical leadership team, individuals who valued integrity as much as profit, compassion as much as conquest. He remained a guiding force, a wise elder statesman, but had finally found a measure of peace, a quiet contentment. He continued to give extensively to charitable causes, but now, his donations were directed towards initiatives that truly empowered, rather than merely placated, focusing on education, sustainable living, and supporting the homeless population, often working anonymously. The weight of his immense fortune, once a source of disillusionment, now felt lighter, channeled towards genuine good, towards making a tangible difference in the world. He had found what he was looking for, not just a successor for his company, but a successor to the values he held dear, values he had almost given up hope of finding in the world. He still maintained a low public profile, preferring quiet contemplation to the glare of the spotlight, but his days of self-imposed isolation were over. He occasionally met with Elara, sharing quiet conversations, often about books they had both read, sometimes about life, sometimes just enjoying the silence of shared understanding. He found solace in her simple wisdom and unwavering optimism, a genuine connection that wealth could never buy. Elara Meadowbrook flourished in her new life. The historic home became a vibrant hub, her small library for children a beacon of learning in the community, its doors always open, its shelves always full. She had the means to support causes close to her heart, to live without the constant worry of bills, and to share her newfound abundance with others, quietly, without fanfare. She continued to perform small acts of kindness daily, a habit ingrained in her nature, now amplified by her capacity to do more, a ripple effect of compassion. Her life was a testament to the quiet power of genuine empathy. Orion and Desdemona Thorne, in stark contrast, faded into obscurity, a cautionary tale whispered in hushed tones, their names synonymous with greed and arrogance. They struggled, their lives a shadow of their former opulence, forever haunted by the spectacular miscalculation that had cost them everything. Their fate served as a stark reminder that true wealth is not measured in bank accounts or luxury possessions, but in the integrity of one's character and the kindness one extends to others. Their once glittering world had been replaced by a mundane, bitter existence, a self-imposed prison of regret. The world, often cynical and self-serving, has a peculiar way of revealing its true colors when least expected. It is in the shadows, when the spotlight of expectation and social convention dims, that a person's intrinsic nature truly shines forth, or withers. Sterling Vance's extraordinary journey proved that genuine kindness, often given without expectation of reward, possesses an immeasurable value that far surpasses any material fortune. It is a currency that always finds its way back to the giver, sometimes in the most unexpected and life-changing ways. For in the end, it is not what one takes from the world, but what one gives, that truly defines a legacy. If you enjoyed this powerful story of transformation and true character, be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on more inspiring tales like this one. We have many more stories about unexpected transformations, the unmasking of deception, and the incredible power of compassion right here on our channel. What did you think of Sterling's ingenious plan to uncover the truth? Did Orion and Desdemona get what they deserved, or do you believe everyone deserves a second chance? And what about Alara? Have you ever witnessed an act of kindness that surprised you and touched your heart? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. We love hearing from you.